Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Silver the Hedgehog here, and once again I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more Let's Play of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, aka for those of you who live in Japan, Mario Luigi RPG for the Game Boy Advance. So, last time, we somehow basically continue exploring new forms of the actual Choco Hawk Woods, to able to actually try to find the remaining fruits and stuff like that. And before that, we did somehow manage to able to technically face off against with the next boss fight against with the forms of Wiggler. And not only that though, we did somehow manage to able to battle some more enemies as usual, despite the fact I still haven't got a clue of how to able to try to figure out how to deal with the forms of Gold Beanie. But I suppose no matter what though, we've only got about 2 more locations left, because well, straight to the point though, we still got plenty of time to potentially try to fight against with the forms of Gold Beanie in the forms of any upcoming locations that we're about to be going into. So because of that, now, as far as I'm aware too, for the fact that we did deal with the forms of yet another boss fight as well, and after that, we've got separated with Mario and Luigi. Well, technically, Mario and Luigi both got separated, so we did manage to take control of Luigi for a while, and as a result, we somehow made our way back to the forms of Bean Kingdom to potentially try to return the Chocola Reserve. And no matter what though, we did somehow restore Queen Bean after all, so because of that, she's now feeling extremely better, and not only that though, her design is now changed into a good side this time around though, so everything else checks out there basically. So today, for this video is that, for the time being though, we'll go ahead and try to explore around in the forms of the actual Castle Town for a while, just because as you can definitely tell, the Castle Town portion of this particular kingdom is now basically fully restored and everything, so this means we can now able to actually investigate into not only tons of buildings, but in addition to some side quests that we can able to actually decide to tackle through, because yes, much like the forms of how it does it on Super Mario RPG, alongside with Paper Mario, there might be a couple of times that you might come across into some NPC townspeople to potentially try to tackle through these side quests. So because of that though, if I can recall correctly, there's actually 2 badges in this particular Castle Town when it comes to trying to tackle through the forms of the actual Castle Town basically. So because of that, I also do realize about the fact that the 1-up mushrooms is now in stock on the actual item shop at this point. So because of that, so yeah, we can now able to actually buy those, despite the fact I'm probably not going to use that straight off the bat, because there is that one specific item that's going to be handy until later on throughout, specifically in the end game, but I'm probably not going to mention about this right about now. So yeah, I suppose no matter what though, we should probably start able to actually walk around in the actual Castle Town for a little while, just before we make our way to the Woo Hoo Hooniversity, which that's going to be the next destination we're about to be heading to next. So because of that, so that's the reason why about the fact I completely forgot to mention about that particular location since yesterday, because relatively speaking though, I just got a bit sidetracked. So anyway, so yeah, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date is of course is the 5th of November today, in some cases in 2025 today, and straight to the point is that tomorrow, after this video releases, is that Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is going to be releasing tomorrow. So because of that though, now speaking of which though, the reviews of the game has already been brought up, since technically yesterday actually, and so far I've only found 5 reviewers so far, which appears to be GameSpot, Shack News, Game Reactor, as well as Games Radar, and Metro. Here's the thing though, most of these reviews are pretty good, except one, which I'll get into more details about that later. For GameSpot, did receive the game a 7 out of 10, and then Shack News did somehow got 8 out of 10 for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and Game Reactor receives the game 9 out of 10, and Games Radar receives the game 3 out of 5, meaning it's like a 3 stars out of 5 kind of system. But one major exception to this, however, though, and that's what appears to be Metro. Metro apparently receives the game a miserable score within 4 out of 10, which I was like, I'm totally speechless about that. Although, despite the fact that the game itself isn't even out yet until tomorrow, which I'll get into my first impressions of the game, specifically in commentary form, while we play through Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, because obviously though we're probably not going to get into any further spoiler details up to this point, especially because considering for the fact that also during around that time, we've only just got about, I would say, 15 more days to go until Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2 is releasing. So because of that, yeah, I'm still going to be incredibly excited about that. And of course, not to mention though, we've only got about 9 more days to go until Dragon Ball Sparking Zero for not only for Switch 1, but as well as Nintendo Switch 2 version is going to be on its way. So I might try to able to actually just try to figure out, but the fact is definitely going to be possible for me to potentially try to go after the Switch 2 version of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, which is definitely possible because of the graphical fidelity. Although despite the fact that the stupid game keycard was a thing in terms of physical releases, so oh yeah, I should also mention about this too that I surprisingly forgot to mention about is that the quick honorable mentions in regards to the forms of Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny for Nintendo Switch 2, despite the fact that the game is going to be on stupid game keycard physical version, as you can definitely tell, it did confirm the release date for it, and that's going to be releasing a day after Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for not only for Switch 1, but as well as Nintendo Switch 2. So because of that though, specifically December 5th. So because of that though, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a heads up at this point. So anyway, so for the time being though, as you can see, we are about to be going into one of those side quests. And in this one in particular is that we need to find 10 of those beanstones. So that's what, again, Luigi Buried Ground thing decides to come into play. And then if you try to go exactly on that specific spot, then you should able to actually try to find one of those beanstones. So because of that, despite the fact that sometimes the actual depth perception might be felt a bit weird sometimes, but when you get the hang of it though, it might not be too bad, despite the fact that sometimes the locations are... Well, here's the thing though, because I'm pretty sure that there's like 5 beanstones in each side of a town. So for instance though, we are currently onto the left side of the actual town, and as you can tell, we're about to be trying to find 5 of those beanstones, and same applies to the forms the right side of a town. So yeah, you can get the idea about the fact that we got able to try to tackle for these little side quests every once in a while. And as I mentioned this to you guys before, I will able to actually replay through some of those exact same mini games as before in the past until later time, just in case we can able to try to farm some more beans, especially to potentially try to able to increase our special status quotes for trying to able to increase our not only HP but in addition to other status as well. So because of that though, I mean, relatively speaking though, it might take a bit of a while, especially because we do need a plentiful of those specific different types of beans. So but I digress. So, anywho, and it's also worth knowing for too, is about the fact that I'm pretty sure also in tomorrow, as far as I'm aware, that we're about to be receiving a Netflix series by DreamWorks Animation, and that's what appears to be none other than, well, the bad guys breaking in. So no matter what though, it's getting the first season on Netflix specifically, and no matter what though, it's going to be releasing and joining new forms of it tomorrow, the same day as the forms of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So I might able to actually check that series out, despite the fact that I still need to able to try to see the Bad Guys 2 first, which still we managed able to get the physical DVD version, so just in case we can able to actually check that film out for reals this time, as opposed to missing out on a big screen. So yeah, that's besides the point. So anywho, the next thing I want to point out too, is that recently though, the Nintendo Music application has recently added Animal Crossing New Leaf, so I guess that makes a little bit more sense to able to actually have the yet another Animal Crossing music selection in terms of that particular application, because as far as I'm aware, we've already got mostly music from the likes of New Horizons, so now we were able to actually now finally got Animal Crossing New Leaf soundtrack. So because of that though, yeah, that seems very top notch, all things considered. So, but anywho, so yeah, let's get into the forms of the next important topic at this point, and that's what it appears to be, for the fact that, well, recently though, not only for the fact that we actually got ourselves the updated financial results recently for not just by the forms of Nintendo Switch 1, but as well as Nintendo Switch 2, but also some more game sales has been updated in terms of the forms of sales numbers. Well, not by much in terms of Switch 1, but in comparison to Switch 2, oh man, there's a huge difference between the last time we actually got ourselves the financial results was back in August this year, but now things starts to get a little bit more interesting in terms of the forms of the financial results up until at this point. So because of that, well, despite the fact that it did say last updated since September 30th in this year in 2025. So allow me to able to explain the rundown of the list to see what the forms of the actual sales numbers have been addressed. So, for instance though, for Switch 1, the Nintendo Switch hardware, as far as I'm concerned, is currently now on to 154.01 million units sold as of the forms of September 30th in 2025, which I'm still generally surprised that the Switch 1 is still increasing sales-wise, so no matter what though, it's actually doing really well, and in fact, no matter what though, it's actually, I would say it's getting pretty close to trump the forms of Nintendo DS sales numbers, or potentially speaking though, it's almost getting very close to beating out PlayStation 2, despite the fact that they still need to try to catch up to 160 million units sold for PlayStation 2, but that's besides the point. So, anywho, talking of which though, when it comes to software total, as far as I'm aware, it's gone up to, let's just say, 1 million, or was it like, I can't really pronounce that particular sentence very well, but I do know for certain for one thing is that the majority of the Switch 1 game sales is still doing rather well, especially because, well, you totally get the idea about what this is going. Now, in terms of Switch 2, on the other hand, well, in terms of the forms of the software total, as far as I'm aware, mind you, keep that in mind though, they only going to be including the first-party titles, such as for instance though, not only does Mario Kart World did manage to increase the actual sales numbers, but on top of that, a newest addition to the lineup is Donkey Kong Bonanza has finally been listed onto its financial results. So, yeah, because no matter what though, the amount of software total, as far as I'm aware, in terms of copies sold wise, is actually 20.62 million copies sold. And in terms of the hardware is concerned for Nintendo Switch 2, it's currently now on to 10.36 million units sold. So, almost like, wow, there goes the actual Wii U financial results for the actual leaderboards as far as this is concerned, especially because no wonder why that the Wii U itself is incredibly flopped, and no matter what though, Nintendo Switch 2 is actually doing pretty well, despite there are some controversial opinions such as of course the ridiculous price tag, and not only that though, it looks remarkably similar to the regular Nintendo Switch, but just being increased with the actual like, you know, resolution and all that jazz. So, but apart from those side of things though, I still found the Switch 2 to be a pretty cool system, I'm not gonna lie, despite the fact that it does have some questionable choices, but either way, at least for some players out there. So, anywho, now, in terms of the forms of the software of games, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 sales numbers, or I'll get into more details about that, as you can tell, that it did say Nintendo GameCube, if you played that on, well, on the Game Boy player, you might able to actually felt the rumble, which I believe on the Wii U Virtual Console re-release version, in addition to the Switch Online Expansion Pack version, the rumble functionality, for what I can gather, does not function as far as I'm aware. So, anywho, yeah, let's get back into the forms of the financial results so far. First of all, when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 selections of games, both of which are Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. For Mario Kart World, that game usually now go up to 9.57 million copies sold, considering for the fact that not only does the game usually get bundled in with the actual Nintendo Switch 2, but on top of that, I believe that also counts for the sake of the forms of the separate physical version. Well, mind you, I still got the game physically though, but still. So yeah, that's actually doing rather well, despite the controversial opinions about the forms of online system, as far as you can definitely tell straight off the bat, because relatively speaking, they still not a big fan of the forms of intermission system, so, which I possibly understand why, but that's what I can really gather about that. And when it comes to Donkey Kong Bonanza, it's actually getting to a pretty good start, within 3.49 million copies sold, considering for the fact that we actually finally got a brand new 3D Donkey Kong game after so many years, since, you know, Donkey Kong 64, which I already know for the fact that we keep on about that in the past, so yeah, it's pretty nice about the fact that Donkey Kong Bonanza is doing really well in terms of sales numbers, so yeah, I fully appreciate about that, especially for the fact that Donkey Kong Bonanza, as for right now, is without doubt my favorite Nintendo Switch 2 game I've ever played, just because of all that how expansive the worlds are, and not to mention though, trying to go and do anything, like for instance smash the terrain and all that stuff, is pretty satisfying to boot, so that's the way how I feel about it, despite there are some frame rate issues from time to time, but it doesn't hinder me during the gameplay as far as it's worth considering for, so... But anyway, so I guess that's all there is to it, so hopefully we'll hear more about the forms of some upcoming games for the actual sales numbers, like for instance though, I get the gut feeling until specifically that the next financial results is going to be taking place in February 2026, so no matter what though, I can imagine about the fact that if Christmas rolls around, my goodness, it might actually boost a lot of sales numbers when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 until when Christmas is around. So because of that though, that way, despite the fact that the actual price tag is still feels a bit ridiculous, as far as you can definitely tell, but regardless of such though, yeah, it's gonna be doing rather well. Especially, it will easily trumps the forms of the Wii U sales numbers as far as the actual units sold wise. So, which I get the feeling that seems to be the case, because you know, both Switch 1 and Switch 2 are both very unique in concept. Well, yeah, you can get the idea. So, anywho, in terms of Switch 1 sales numbers, as far as I'm aware, in terms of software, it's basically unchanged when it comes to positioning and stuff like that, but the numbers-wise has been increased slightly. So, for instance, though, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still on top, like, for instance, though, it's now on to 69.59 million copies sold. Animal Crossing New Horizons is now on to 48.62 million copies sold. Well, considering for the fact that now that the Switch 2 edition of that game is going to be on its way, which most people seem to found the Switch 2 editions these days are a little bit concerned, which I'll get into more details about that if we keep on wandering around aimlessly most of the time, especially because, as you can definitely tell, we are now going to be going on to the next side quest here and there, which we do need to find 5 of one of these little tiny beanie guys. I don't know what exactly how I called them, because I didn't pay attention to the text box here and there, so yeah, we got to able to wander around, you know, quite often before you're able to actually continue our progress into the next destination every once in a while, because even then, but then again though, I will try my best able to actually go for a true 100% completion if possible, but I highly doubt it, much like Super Mario RPG, but unlike Paper Mario, that actually did indeed manage to accomplish every aspect of that game, so... But anyway, next up we have is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That game is now on to 36.93 million copies sold, so it's doing really well still. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is now on to 33.34 million copies sold. Super Mario Odyssey was now on to 29.84 million copies sold, so it's getting really close to 30 million, that's for sure. I mean, God knows until, you know, in next February, in February 2026, that I would guarantee for the fact that Super Mario Odyssey will indeed able to actually reach for about 30 million copies in due time. So, anyway, next up we have is Pokemon Scarlet/Violet Combined, usually Generation 9 game. That game, or those two games combined, is now on to 27.61 million copies sold. Next up we have is Pokemon Sword/Shield, basically Generation 8. Those two games together is now sold for about 26.96 million copies sold. And next up we have is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That game is now on to 22.15 million copies sold. Super Mario Party, the original Super Mario Party I should say, is still doing rather well, apparently. So I believe that game is now on to 21.23 million copies sold. And lastly, in terms of the top 10 sales numbers, is, unsurprisingly, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and that game is now on to 18.53 million copies sold. So, yeah, I guess that's all there is to it, basically. In terms of the forms of those specific, sales numbers when it comes to software of the specifically Nintendo Switch 1 stuff. So, yeah, that seems very, considering, but either way. The next thing I want to point out too is that, apparently though, they may look like that Street Fighter 6 is getting a yet another collaboration, but this time what appears to be, Ghosts and Goblins collaboration. Like, for instance though, it's going to include a classic game based off of the arcade game released in 1985, so yeah, it seems very legitimate. And on top of that, there's going to be bringing some more stuff here and there, which I don't know if I can able to try to think about that on top of my head though, but it's mainly because, as you can definitely tell, that I'm going to be able to try to wander around all over the place, as you can definitely tell. But anyway, yeah, I guess that's all there's to it. The next thing I want to point out too is that, did you guys know it's been 6 years ago since that Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 for Nintendo Switch did somehow first came out, and my goodness, ever since 6 years back, that was generally speaking, was the final entry in terms of the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games series. So, because, you know, not only does the licensing has moved on, and on top of all that stuff though, that was usually the final game to incorporate with Alpha Dream as part of the developer, just like, well, you totally get the idea about that. So, anywho though, the next thing I want to point out too is that I did manage to able to double check on the forms within Sonic Dash recently on my spare hour time, and yes indeed, we're about to be getting, miraculously, the third and the final member in terms of the Babylon Rogue playable characters coming up in Sonic Dash. And straight to the point, we somehow predicted this not too while ago actually, after we did somehow unlocked Storm the Albatross not too while ago, and yes, we are finally going to be getting Wave the Swallow as a playable character in Sonic Dash. And I was like, well, about time they finally managed able to have the rest of the forms of the Babylon Rogues as playable characters in a singular Sonic Dash game for quite a long time. I mean, relatively speaking, we've already got Jet quite a long time ago, but now we're about to be receiving, well, we've already received Storm the Albatross already, and now we're about to be getting Wave the Swallow, which, as a result, yeah, it's about time I can finally get a chance able to go back into Sonic Dash every once in a while, because the last time I actually did manage to play Sonic Dash was back in, almost close to Halloween, because relatively speaking, we actually got another variant of Infinite as a playable character, but yeah, you can get the idea. So anyway, because of that though, I did manage to able to update the actual game, so no matter what though, Sonic Dash is now onto version 9.0.0. So because of that though, meaning about the fact that not only does Wave the Swallow is going to be making its way into Sonic Dash, and on top of that, bug fixes and refinements has been addressed. So, yeah, I guess that's all there is to it. So, anyway, this particular section looks familiar to you because we are playing Super Mario Bros., but with a different perspective. So yeah, that's actually pretty interesting, all things considered. Like, we got able to dodge a lot of hazards here and there, and when you make it to the end, like right there, then you should able to actually get one of those nifty awards, like the Golden Mushroom. This allows you to able to increase or restore everything for the Mario Bros, basically. And here's the thing, with the Golden Mushrooms in mind, it's probably best we'll save those until whenever we make our way towards the end game, because trust me, what I'm saying is, in the final stretch of this particular game, it's gonna get really brutal at the end, which you'll find out soon enough, until specifically the next couple of days' time. Oh, I want to classify for something about this too for you guys. Unfortunately though, as far as what Blaze did tell me about this the other day, well, usually for the sake of the forms of around a couple of hours ago, unfortunately though, she has no choice but to delay more parts of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance, so no matter what though, I'm afraid to tell you for the sake of time folks, is that you got to wait for a little while. So for the time being though, we'll play some more Mario Luigi Superstar Saga for the Game Boy Advance for a certain amount of time, and then whilst Blaze is up for it though, when it comes to going back into, well, you know, Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance, then we should able to let her resume that point until specifically next weekend. Not this weekend though, but next weekend, I should say, for the sake of not only the 15th, but also the 16th of November as well. And just around that time until when Christmas is just around the corner, or anything else potentially. You know, kind of like what we did done back in Evolves of How It Does in last year, that we managed able to let, or actually kind of think about it though, it was me, wasn't it, that I somehow managed to did done Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance last year. And no matter what though, because I remember in last year, I have no choice but to delay some more parts of Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance at one point, so just in case we could able to actually get these little recording sessions done in due time. So no matter what though, it's going to be remarkably similar to this year this time around with 2025, but hopefully though it's not going to be as ridiculously long in terms of the actual delay time compared to the Evolves of How It Does It for last year was. So anyway, there's another warp pipe right there, which now we can able to access to 3 warp zones in particular, which then again, you know, we are missing one of them. So yeah, I will try to search around when it comes to finding some more green warp pipes to able to actually traverse ourselves into some different warp zones in particular to go and access to fast travels here and there. So anywho though, so yeah, I guess that's all there is to it. So yeah, I do apologize with the forms this unexpected announcement in regards to the forms of returning back into Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance. So, but usually here's the thing though, sometimes stuff happens. So, anywho though, the next thing I want to point out too, speaking of which, when it comes to Donkey Kong Bonanza, well, I'm convenient to know for the fact that until by the end of this month, specifically, let's say the 25th of November, all the way up to the 2nd of December, I'm actually going to be going back on playing through some more Donkey Kong Bonanza for one reason, and that's of course more of one of those Emerald Rushes at one point, and because of that, not only does one statue is going to be making its appearance, but also 2. And those 2 statues in particular coming up is going to be pretty cool and awesome at the same time. Not only does it bring back Chunky Kong from Donkey Kong 64, but Lanky Kong as well as statue forms. And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. In fact, no matter what though, it's about the fact that we might get some more representation for the sake of the forms of Donkey Kong 64 references here and there. I mean, obviously though, for the fact that Diddy Kong was there, well, usually here's the thing though, because he's now a NPC, of course, much like the forms of how it does in Super Mario Odyssey, where Luigi was the NPC in Super Mario Odyssey as part of the forms of Luigi's Blue World free DLC update. So, but I digress. So, yeah, I suppose the only thing is left now in terms of the forms of specific statues based off from other Donkey Kong games, like for instance though, I would suggest that they might able to add it in Tiny Kong from Donkey Kong 64 as well, and also potentially Kitty Kong from Donkey Kong Country 3. I mean, who knows up to that point, or maybe if we might able to actually see Funky Kong, and in addition to let's just say Candy Kong as statues at one point. I mean, here's the thing though, when it comes to that particular statue event, as far as I'm aware, it obviously always takes place in DK Island, because that's the way you can able to actually try to store in not only a couple of statues, but in addition to some other goodies as well. Well, mind you, despite the fact that most people seem to complain about that DK Island is nothing more than just filler, when it comes to the forms of how lame it does manage to bring a ridiculous price tag, which, yeah, it just feels a bit unnecessary to able to actually bringing a, you know, paid DLC to begin with, because almost first of all it was going to be for free, you know, just like the forms of how it does it for Luigi's Blue World in Super Mario Odyssey, but unfortunately though, sometimes Nintendo can be greedy sometimes, at least according to what some players out there, some able to actually just pretty much subbed up as the forms of Nintendo nowadays, is that, well, because this almost kind of feels a bit remarkably similar to, like, Krusty Krab or something like that when it comes to SpongeBob, or even Mr. Burns for the sake of the forms of The Simpsons or something like that, so, but I digress. So, yeah, I guess that's all there is to it. Oh, and on top of that, Minecraft has recently released the Dragon Ball Z DLC just recently came out. So because of that though, yeah, I got nothing else to add. So, and I suppose, I don't know if it's likely a speculation kind of thing, but I get the gut feeling for the fact that the Super Mario Galaxy movie trailer will be attached to Wicked for Good, meaning that it will be released online before the 21st of November. So it could be either it's going to happen in this week or next week or anything else like that. I mean, it's a bit difficult to judge at this point because we still haven't got a clue. When does the first trailer for the Super Mario Galaxy movie is going to be taking place? My guess was it's going to be at some point. It's still going to be happening on November, much like the forms of how it does it for the second trailer for the Super Mario Bros. Movie back in 2022 in November during that time. So, but then again, we shall wait and see what happens in due time. So it's just part of the forms of speculations to somehow comes into play, but either way. So anyway, the next thing I want to point out too, potentially speaking of, is that I just get the sense of feeling for the fact that most Nintendo Switch 2 editions these days are a little bit more concerning for some players out there, and some players out there seem to believe for the fact that they do realize for the fact that the Switch 2 edition games are worse than they expected, which I'm guessing is probably because no matter what though, they're just basically just repackaging Switch 1 games but with some enhancements for the sake of Nintendo Switch 2, and on top of that, occasional added in some extra stuff that's usually dedicated to Nintendo Switch 2 sometimes. I mean, sometimes though it can be felt a bit hit and miss sometimes when it comes to some games in particular for Nintendo Switch 2. I mean, some players attempt to found us to be a little bit worse compared to the forms of how it does it for game key cards, or between both the game key cards and Nintendo Switch 2 editions are kind of feels a bit unnecessary because they are essentially just, well, DLC expansions, but just, well, it's hard for me to explain because this is all new concepts, you know, with all that, you know, move along to the forms of the next generation of systems as far as I'm concerned. I mean, still, no matter what though, it just feels a bit questionable for some scenarios. So anyway, there's another cave section, and this time we're going back onto the Super Mario Bros. Gameplay style, but this time with Mario, but as the forms of a almost try to be gone a little bit flattened thanks to the forms of Luigi's hammer and stuff like that. So, now believe it or not though, there's actually two different rewards in this particular section. You can either go onto the similar situation as the forms of trying to find the warp zone from the original Super Mario Bros. In World 1-2. So relatively speaking, if you go all the way up there and talk to this guy right there, then you should able to get yourselves the yet another badge, which is the forms of high-end badge. So, however, here's the catch though, we can't go back up, so we have to do this obstacle course again, but except this time we're now going to be going to the lower routes. So, but I'm sure enough though, it doesn't take that long to able to get to this point right there. In fact, it's actually not too shabby right there, because I do found these sections to be a lot funner. So anyway, so let's go and try to go and be very careful not to get touched by these spikes, and there we go. And when you go onto the bottom road, it actually gives you a 1-up, so yeah, nothing else to it. Also, I'm generally surprised about the fact that while looking back in November months in particular, within the past few years, or should I say the ridiculous amount of years, for the sake of the forms of the Mario games from time to time, that believe it or not though, while looking back on these Mario selections of games released in November, we actually got about, I would say 11 games in particular, which appears to be Mario Party 5, Mario Kart Double Dash, Mario Luigi Brothership, which by that time until the next couple of days, that game was expected to become 1 year old, which even then, gee, time flies, despite I still have not completed the game yet. And as I mentioned this earlier, that Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 for Nintendo Switch did originally came out in November, usually for the sake of the phones of in 2019, just before, well, let's just say just around 2 years before the actual 2021 Tokyo Olympics did manage to take place, because, you know, horrible story happens. And not only that though, we also got Mario Power Tennis for the Nintendo GameCube, as well as the original Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii, and Mario Kart DS, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, which, oh boy, we'll get into more details about that if we dive into the next couple of days for potentially speaking, I was just trying to say, like, unhappy 10th anniversary of the game's release of Mario Tennis Ultra Smash for the Wii U, which, still, no wonder why that the Wii U is incredibly flopped, especially no wonder why that, unless if you don't account the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games duology games on the Wii U, but usually here's the thing though, that was the only Mario sports game to be released on the Wii U, usually for a brand new installment during that time, so... But anyway, and also we've got Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, as well as the forms of Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I guess that's all there is to it, basically. Although, here's the fun fact for you, is that if you live in Japan, obviously though for the fact that Super Smash Bros. Melee was released in November in Japan, and then for Super Mario Galaxy was released in November in Japan as well. So, yeah, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a heads up about the forms of the whole gigantic list when it comes to looking back on any of the Mario games to be released on that specific singular month. So, but anyway, oh, we got ourselves level 16 for Luigi, so yeah, how about that? So, anyway though, I suppose the next thing I want to point things out too is that remember when I said this in the past few days, I felt it to be incredibly disgusting when I first saw that particularly ridiculous price tag with that special edition Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller when it comes to Resident Evil themed, because chances are though it's going to be cost about ridiculous amount, within $100 if you manage to able to pre-order the actual controller within the forms of in Best Buy, and on top of that, I'm pretty sure that I'm not entirely sure for the fact that the over the States may able to actually cost about $90 or more. Well, here's what the things gets a bit more ridiculous, is that, potentially speaking now, that if you try to get the special edition version of the Switch 2 Pro controller, Resident Evil version, my goodness, in the UK version, it's gonna be cost about £84. Jeez Louise. Because compared to the regular version, it was like, still 75 quid, which it still feels a bit too much. So, yeah, I guess no wonder why they somehow pointed out that thankfully backwards compatibility controllers are usually capable for trying to able to actually play Nintendo Switch 1 games and Nintendo Switch 2 games on a singular system. So, at the very least, that's something, I suppose. So, anyway, oh yeah, let's get into the forms of some enemy encounters that we've already fought against earlier, and those enemies what appears to be, we've already fought against with the forms of Lacapi, which, get it, because, you know, it's almost like, it's hard for me to explain, because we already know for a fact that we technically already face off against with Lacapi. For Lacapi enemies, we already fought from earlier, those enemies do have 40 HP or 50 in brackets, and then if you manage to defeat one, you're able to get about 20 experience points, and also you get 10 experience points, if I'm not mistaken, but you do get 12 coins, so that's something. And also we've got ourselves these enemies right there, which we already defeat one of them, which appears to be Tanuba. Tanuba, as you probably able to expect, is basically a Goomba, but somehow merged with a Tanuki power-up combined into one. So, yeah, with Tanuba, Tanuba does have 30 HP or 70 HP, if I'm not mistaken, and then you're able to actually get 20 or 14 experience points, if I'm not mistaken either, but you don't have coins, or you might get 20, I can't really judge on that front. So, anyway, as for the forms of Troopy, Troopy does have 20 HP, and if you manage to defeat him, you're able to get about 3 coins, and as far as experience points are concerned, you can either get 4 or 16. Again, the numbers itself, as I mentioned earlier, is not exactly accurate enough, so, and on top of that, there's also Paratroopy as well. Like, Paratroopy does have 40 HP, and on top of that, when it comes to experience points, you're able to get about 20 or 9. Or when it comes to coins, you can either get either 4 or 8, again, because the number accuracy is not that amazing. Oh, there's also another enemy right there, but we're probably not going to get into that just yet, because every once in a while, some enemy encounters like these guys right there are pretty aggressive, I'm not gonna lie for saying that, but regardless of such though, yeah, that's essentially how we can go for this point, especially because, well, what I've noticed is that the butt bombs are, well, again, we're probably not going to get into more further details up to this point for right about now, because, well, straight to the point, we are actually getting very close towards our next destination we're about to be getting to at this point. I mean, relatively speaking though, is that I need to able to try to, you know, search around every once in a while, so just in case I just want to get these things out of the way before we're able to continue our story progression, to potentially try to meet up with the forms of the main antagonist of the game, which appears to be Kakalata. So either way, you can pretty much get the idea of straight to the point. So, yeah, I guess that's all there is to say, in terms of the forms of today's topic at this point. I mean, short enough though, it's about the fact that I've already, brought down quite a number of things when it comes to the forms of, what's been happening so far. Not just by the forms of Nintendo Switch 1, but in addition to the Nintendo Switch 2. So, yeah, relatively speaking though, is that I'm very pleased that Switch 2 is doing really, really well. So, anyway, and yeah, every once in a while is that the, Tanuba enemies right there can sometimes manage to turn themselves into either Mario or Luigi if you decide able to actually deal with the forms of well-timing hammer attack right there. So just in case you can able to actually try to deal with some little amount of damage to that particular enemy in mind. So, but yeah, everything else checks out there basically. So anywho, now I suppose another thing else I want to classify for mentioning about this too is that, potentially speaking though, for what I've realized, I haven't got a clue of when exactly does the Simpsons collaboration with Fortnite shorts is going to be releasing on Disney+, but I do know for one thing in particular. Oh my lord, why is the Grinch film in 2000 of all years most able to came out on Disney+, which I'm just like, okay, this is getting a little bit out of hand, especially they've now decided to include the majority of the Universal picture films onto the actual Disney+, so relatively speaking, you know, I mean, what's next? DreamWorks animation or something like that? I mean, it's hard for me to judge on that front, but regardless of such though, it just feels a bit weird in transition when it comes to the forms of some film companies decided able to actually get into one of those other streaming services as far as this is worth considering about. So, oh yeah, a quick note I need to mention is that one of those games in particular, as far as I'm aware, which appears to be Super Mario Party Jamboree, because as far as I can definitely tell, that game has also been updated in terms of the actual sales numbers. I'm guessing it's probably thanks to the forms of the Switch 2 edition or something like that. So relatively speaking though, that Super Mario Party Jamboree is slowly increasing up to that point. I mean, relatively speaking though, as far as I can definitely tell, Super Mario Party Jamboree was currently now on to 8.64 million copies sold as the forms of September 30th in 2025. I'm guessing, like I said before, it's most likely thanks to the forms of the Switch 2 edition as far as I'm concerned. And then meanwhile, when it comes to Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I'm afraid to tell you, that particular game doesn't get increased in terms of the forms of sales numbers when it comes to, like, you know, copies sold. It's still got about 7.52 million copies sold as the forms of March 31st in 2024, but maybe it will able to get the actual specific number increases by a little until specifically later on. If that's the case, I mean, we shall wait and see. But anyway, but I do know for one thing in particular is that Super Mario Party Jamboree was currently now on to 23rd place position right now, and then it did certainly manage to beat Super Mario Maker 2 when it comes to the sales numbers. So, which I'm still generally surprised about the fact that Super Mario Maker 2 never gets increases in terms of the actual sales numbers, which I felt was a little bit bizarre, especially considering the fact that, imagine this, right? If the Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Maker 2 was going to be a thing, that also means about the fact that Super Mario Maker 3 will not happen for the time being. I mean, imagine this, right? And I can assure you about the fact that most people seem to find this to be a little bit of a worrisome these days, in regards to the forms of the introduction into the Nintendo Switch 2 edition from already existing games for Nintendo Switch 1. Like, for instance though, I don't guarantee for the fact that we might not get a new installment of the Mario Party games for the time being, because we already got Super Mario Party Jamboree for not only for Nintendo Switch 1, but in addition to the newest entry, or should I say the newest edition on Nintendo Switch 2, so I wouldn't guarantee we'd probably not gonna get the next Mario Mario Party until specifically the next couple of years' time. And then meanwhile, when it comes to Kirby, specifically 3D Kirby in mind, that we've already got, you know, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, plus Star-Crossed World. So I won't expect that there won't be any, brand new Kirby games in the near future. Well, aside from just one coming up, which is of course the spin-off entry in the series, which is of course Kirby Air Riders, which I'm still excited for it still. But regardless of such though, when it comes to mainline games in particular, well, it is very impossible when it comes to judging if there's going to be a new installment coming up or not likely, and it's also the case of the forms of Animal Crossing New Horizons, because as far as I'm aware, that they're able to actually expect to have the newest entry in the series when it comes to Animal Crossing specifically for Nintendo Switch 2, but unfortunately though, no new game has been addressed. It's basically just a port to an already existed game on Nintendo Switch with Animal Crossing New Horizons, so meaning about the fact that there's not going to be a new entry for the time being. So because of that though, that's why most people seem to be able to get a lot of critique about the forms of how criticized about the forms of not only the already existed Nintendo Switch 2 editions from already existed Switch 1 games, but on top of all that stuff though, with the unnecessary existence of, well, you get the idea with the stupid game key cards that I keep on brought up like so many times already. Which, believe me, what I'm saying is that once the next batch of the third-party supported games is going to be on its way for Nintendo Switch 2, oh boy, you might be able to hear me complaining about the forms of stupid game key card dialogue a lot, especially because of all that. Well, you get the drill at this point, so... But anyway, so that pretty much does it for the majority of the side quests for now on, and on top of all that stuff though, elsewhere on the Being outskirts, so we're going to be making our way to the next location, which appears to be, well, Woo Hoo Hooniversity, which that's going to be our next destination we're about to be getting to at this point right about now. So yeah, we now ended up in the actual location we're about to enter. So because of that, yeah, first things first though, let's grab the super syrup right there, which is likely an enhanced version of the regular syrup. So that will certainly come in handy if you almost attempt to run out of those bros points, as you can tell. So and of course we are super greedy to able to try to get even more coins out of these little blocks right there. So yeah, everything else checks out there. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else around here besides the fact that we can able to, well, save our game quickly. And straight to the point, we've somehow made our way to the Woo Hoo Hooniversity right about now. Specifically, the entrance portion of this particular building. So yeah, we've come a long way for this point, folks, especially because considering for the fact that I'm not entirely sure if it's possible that we're now onto the halfway point of this, basically. I might be wrong, but regardless of such though, I suppose for now on though, let's go ahead and try to explore some rooms in this particular Woo Hoo Hooniversity. Oh geez, something bad is happening. Run! Oh jeez, what the heck is going on here? Well, I guess it's only a way to find out, to be able to investigate in this particular place. So, anywho, I suppose the final thing I want to talk about this for the sake of time is that I actually kind of think about it though, there's nothing else I can really, point things out in terms of something new or anything else like that, but I do know for one thing in particular is that I think we've got about exactly 23 more days to go until the UK version of Zootropolis 2 is going to be releasing, and on top of all that stuff though, just, well, you get the idea. Oh geez, we somehow come across into an enemy encounter such as Laser Sniffet. So, although I won't get into more details about the forms of that specific enemy status until tomorrow, because something tells me that this particular place is not safe. At least as far as I'm aware, it's going to be, well, pretty dangerous as far as I can definitely tell. So anyways, we got the super mushroom and the syrup, so that's nice. And if we check around here, I don't think there's anything else in here, I don't think. And as you can tell, there's a lot of security doors. So because of that, let's go and explore through here just to see what's the fuss is all about. And of course, we got the regular mushroom. And straight to the point, we somehow activate the block to get rid of that laser gate. So, And I believe this is where we got able to explore around in this place for a little while. And I don't think that particular thing is going to be helpful. And we got ourselves the Hoo Bean, which is nice. Because, yeah, there are a couple of times, though, in some secret areas, if you do manage to able to become, like, Squished Mario, for instance, when you try to fit in these little tiny halls, there might be occasional hidden blocks that we can able to try to find, in case if you really want to go after some more, Hoo Beans here and there. So that's why the fact that we somehow keep on getting some more Hoo Beans every once in a while, so just in case we can able to, well, try to make something at some point, so... But that's not going to be until specifically for later on, though, because as soon as we're able to keep, the more we try to traverse for this place, something tells me about the fact that we're about to be exploring into a different locations later on. So, but then again, no, we're not going to get to the actual adjustments at that point, so... So yeah, like I said before, hopefully by that time until next week, for the fact that everything else will be back to its normal state, in terms of the uploading schedules alike. But for now on though, this is going to be a 7 days a week, in terms of the forms of some more uploading schedules for Mario Luigi Superstar Saga. I keep thinking about another games in particular for Mario, which... Oh, what the heck? What the heck is up with that hit detection? I swear I did manage to jump on the actual sniffer guy, but chances are though, I ended up letting Luigi get tripped over, so... Although it can be pretty annoying at times though, because it's especially noticeable that his character felt a bit remarkably similar to not only Paper Mario, but in addition to other Mario Luigi games in particular, including Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, that sometimes though enemies will tend to able to throw you off a bit when it comes to the timing and all that jazz when it comes to first striking counters, so, I mean, relatively speaking though, it does take a bit while to get used to, so, and also another thing too, for the fact that if you ever played the 3DS remake of Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, there was actually an additional button in the battle system which appears to be the X button, and that signifies Emergency Guard, which even then, I'll get into more details about that until tomorrow, because, well, straight to the point though, we can able to try to face off against with even more laser sniffers, I should say, so just in case we can able to get some more experience points, so I highly doubt we can able to encounter the gold beanies until specifically later on, so alright, so let's go and... Oh, okay, he's not down, so... But then again, I'll get into more details about the actual HP status and stuff like that, and we somehow reached level 17 with Luigi, so how about that? And I suppose we should probably select stash, and I would classify for the fact I'll go in the actual specific categories in a different order, so until next time that is. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and save our game and end the video right there. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, is that we are still about to be exploring into the Woo Hoo Hooniversity to investigate with a lot of things. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.